Hello friends, so for today's video I'm going to be doing a book haul, but specifically just with books that I got from my local bookstores. One of them is called Bookman's and the other one is called Changing Hands. I'm sure you've probably heard me mention both of these before. If you ever use the website bookshop.org, which has money that goes towards indie bookstores, you can actually attach your bookshop.org account to Changing Hands, and you can do the same thing with Libro FM, which is an audiobook subscription service. So then the money that you are using for audiobooks will actually go towards Changing Hands, which is great. Sadly, you can't do that with Bookman's, but if you ever are in the state of Arizona and the United States, I highly recommend going to both of these used bookstores. They're phenomenal when it comes to giving you store credit. So actually, all of the books but one that I'm going to mention, I didn't spend any money on them because I had a lot of store credit. So I'm gonna just go ahead and jump right into the books. First up, we have a special edition of Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. So this is one where I have been kind of having my eye on this and I've been waiting to see if it pops up at one of the bookstores, and the special edition did. And this is specifically the Illumicrate edition. They actually took the time to write that on the back. And this is, like I said, one that I've kind of been on the fence about whether or not I wanted to give this a go, but the series is completed now, and I have enjoyed some of Naomi Novik's other works, so since I saw this one and it's a special edition, I was like, okay, perfect time to snag it. Next up, we have an enormous bind-up of the Awakens series. This is massive. It's so heavy, and there's a lot of really cool illustrations and whatnot in this edition as well. Let me find one. So at the chapter start right here, you see that there is artwork on the page, which is really cool. And I like that it's a bind up of the entire series. I like the artwork on the cover. This is a series that I've always, kind of similar to Deadly Education, this is a series that I've had my eye on. I've read some of this author's other works, and I have never disliked one of her books. I wouldn't say any of them have ever been favorites. I wouldn't even really say I've loved any of her books, but they're very consistently enjoyable for me. This series, I've seen kind of mixed feelings for it, so it's not one that I was in a hurry to run out and buy. But when I saw this bind up, I was like, all right, I mean, come on, that's a good deal. Speaking of bind ups and fun editions, I got this edition of Hitchhikers Guide to the Galaxy. I have a fair amount of backlist fantasy I want to get around to, but not as much sci-fi. So I'm hoping that when I do get around to some sci-fi books, that I can pick this one up. Next up is a book that I believe was originally written in French and has since been translated. I have heard very good things about it, but I've also heard that it's really weird and really kind of bizarre, but very endearing. And the title would be The City of Dreaming Books. I've not seen too many people talk about it, but the people who have spoken of this always speak of it very highly. And I think one of the first reviews that I saw for this one said something like, okay, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but this is the best book I've ever read, something like that. And I was like, well, I mean, sold, right? When you see that kind of praise, you're like, well, I mean, I gotta at least try it, right? I think it follows a little dinosaur living within a library or something like that. I think one time I think it was Reagan talk about this, and I was like, wow, that sounds interesting. A lot of you know that my husband is a big reader as well, and he's really into literary fiction. He also really likes literary fiction that's really strange and bizarre and a little hard to follow. And so I'm hoping this can be one that the two of us maybe buddy read at some point. I think that would be a lot of fun. After that, we have the graphic novel Mooncakes. So I have a collaborative channel called World Hoppers that I run, and all of the AdSense revenue and merch sales goes toward charity. And I was doing a video for that for some fall reads. And my friend Steph, who I'll have her linked, she mentioned this one, and I was like, oh, that sounds fun. She said it's kind of like quintessential fall reading and that it's just very cozy and gets you in the mood for the fall season. And immediately after we did that video, I went to the bookstore and it was right at the front. I'm like, well, my used bookstore agrees that this is quintessential fall reading, because I think they even had specifically autumn themed books. And so I saw it and I was like, hey, that's what Steph was talking about. So it looks like it's very cute and very cozy and charming, and the colors are really pretty. So I don't know too much about this. I just know that Steph recommended it and that it's apparently really sweet and cozy. So I got it. Next up we have If You Could See the Sun. I mentioned that of all of these, there was only one that I didn't use store credit on, and it was this one. So after I read this, I actually read this via audiobook. So I listened to it and I thought it was so charming and delightful, but it was touching on some really important topics, specifically topics primarily dealing with class and status and the desperation that you experience when you are not doing well financially. So I really liked this book and I was like, okay, I want to buy a physical copy of it. And so I drove down to I don't know why I did this. I drove down to the bookstore and they had it and I was like, I'm getting it. And I was really excited because I really liked it. And I'm definitely excited to see what else this author writes and pick up more of her works because I really liked the writing style and the voice in this. It is young adult, so the heavier topics are approached in a way that I think is a little easier to take in. Maybe doesn't have quite the same heaviness to it, even though the topics themselves are heavy. But anyway, you get the point. I thought it was fun. I liked it. I got it at my bookstore. Next up, we have the Sunbearer Trials. This is a new release from this year. It was also a Goodreads nominee. It's by Aiden Thomas. I've only read one thing by Aiden Thomas so far, and that would be Lost in the Neverwoods, which I think is the one that seems to be liked the least. And while there were a couple things that I didn't love about that one, the ending I found really moving, and I was like, okay, I 100% want to check out more of your works, because even with the aspects of Lost in the Neverwoods that I didn't like, I was still made to feel emotional, which I think is impressive when usually if there's something you don't love or there's a couple things you don't love, you're like, that's too bad, and at most you kind of feel middle of the road. But when you can have the emotional impact be up here in spite of having some other things that are more in the middle, then I think that just shows what the author is capable of and the fact that you might end up liking other works by them. Anyway, that was a long tangent just to say I'm excited to eventually try the Sunbearer Trials. Next up is a special edition of The Ones We're Meant to Find. This author's works, I have read all 3 of the books that are currently out, and they're always really interesting, and the writing style is always really different. I do think that the writing is very hit or miss for people because there's just something about it that makes you feel slightly disoriented and it feels slightly out of place. So I don't know that I can just readily recommend it and be like, oh yeah, this was so interesting, definitely give it a try, because of the fact that it seems to be kind of a acquired taste, if you will. This particular one is sort of a dystopian sci-fi type of setup, and we're looking at this world that is essentially in an apocalyptic state. There are natural disasters occurring all the time, and the wealthiest individuals are living off of the ground. They live in these almost like sky cities, and then everybody who's left on land, it's a ticking time bomb. Their lives are pretty much at stake all the time because of how bad natural disasters have become. And the 2 main characters, we have these sisters who are separated. One of them is believed to be dead, and the other one is essentially searching for her sister. She doesn't really believe she's actually gone. And there's some really bizarre twists and turns. And again, you do feel somewhat disoriented the whole time. I enjoyed this. It was strange. I mean, it's just, her writing is very strange. Next up, we have Guns of Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So a couple of my other friends here on BookTube, my friend Jessie May did this really fun vlog where she had myself and a bunch of our friends recommend books to her. And then she read them all, and then she kind of determined at the end, she had a ranking of the ones that she liked the most, and it was also kind of playfully like, which of my friends actually knows my reading taste the best. And one of the books that she ended up really liking was Guns of Dawn, and this was a recommendation from my friend Alan from the channel Library of Alexandria. It sounds really fun. It's a different setting than what you typically see in fantasy. I think it has more to do with, as you might expect, guns. So it's a different time period inspiration. And I am excited to be picking up fantasy books that kind of branch out of the traditional settings that we're so accustomed to. So really excited. I believe this is also a standalone, and I really like fantasy standalones. And then also, speaking of Alan, these next 4 books are all part of the same series. That series would be the Shadow Campaigns. So this particular author, Django Wexler, Alan has said he really likes this series. So the first one that I got is a smaller paperback, and I typically try not to buy multiple books in the same series if I haven't even read the first one. But the next 3 were all these hardbacks, and like I said, I had store credit. So I was like, I've been looking for this series, I've been hoping to find this series, and then I find these ones, and I was just thinking, I have high hopes, I think I'm gonna like it, so I'm just gonna go ahead and take a chance on it. So I got these next 3. I'm hoping to give this series a try at some point this year. Same with Guns of the Dawn. I really think I'm gonna like these ones. So we'll see. That's it for some books that I've gotten from my local bookstores. I'll have both of those stores linked in the description bar down below. Let me know your thoughts on any of the books that I've mentioned. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.